is my favorite band, and I think at this point that goes without saying. They have literally hundreds of hours of outtakes, along with hundreds more of live recordings. But the way that 99% of people will experience Ween is through their studio albums. And those are what I aim to rank and review today. For this list, I'm considering all of the studio outings of original material that are officially on streaming as of 2026, including Shinoa Volume 1 and the Friends EP. I want to say at the top, I like all of these albums, even the lowest ranked ones. Again, if you haven't noticed, I'm a Ween fan, and that means all of Ween. But the whole point of this video is to rank these albums. I'm not going to take the easy way out and just have them all tie for first with 10 out of 10s. Also, after each review, you'll see my rating, my favorite songs, and least favorite songs. Just because a song is my least favorite doesn't mean I don't like it. In fact, as we get deeper into this list, some of my least favorites are songs that I genuinely love. But I forced myself to pick one. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about any of these albums, check out my History of Ween episodes, which covered their inception, production, and the context surrounding the album cycle. And of course, leave your rankings in the comments below. Maybe we'll come to some sort of consensus as a community. Alright, let's get into the ranking. Starting with... The first of the two projects Ween released in 2007 was the Friends EP, a collection of 5 songs recorded during the La Cucaracha sessions. The title track, Friends, ironically a remix of a song that hadn't released yet, is the superior version, in my opinion. I got to put the hammer down as a fun, high-energy Diener track that feels like if Moist Boys got really into synthesizers. The only track I mixed on is King Billy, which I find to be Ween's weakest foray into reggae, despite collaborating with King Jammy and the Firehouse Crew. Light Me Up is a real highlight of the album, with its Santana-flavored chorus riff and ferocious vocal performance from Jeans.
I got threats made of the best designer shit you've ever seen.
And Slow Down Boy is a sweet crooner ballad, where the only thing resembling a joke is the tried and true-esque double entendre in the hook. While I think it's probably more consistent than the album that would come 4 months later, with only one occasional skip for me at only 5 tracks, it's hard to rate this above any of Ween's full-length studio outings. No single track on the Friends EP strikes me as a killer single, unlike every other project after this in the ranking. Hey, in conclusion, when your worst album is still a 7.3 out of 10, you know you're doing something right.
'Cause you're the friend that I've been searching for.
La Cucaracha is Ween's most recent and maybe final studio album, which is sad considering the album will be 19 years old this October. Oh my god. When I first started listening to Ween, I heard a lot of people say, oh, Chalk and Cheese through Shinola are great. La Cucaracha is a mixed bag. And while that's certainly true to an extent, I absolutely think La Cucaracha was underrated on release. While there are a few forgettable songs on the track list, stuff like Blue Balloon, My Own Bare Hands, and Lullaby prove that the brothers Ween could still write a killer song. And that's not even to mention my favorite track on the album, the closer, Your Party. I think the problem with La Cucaracha is the apparent lack of enthusiasm in the performances. Quite a few of these songs come alive on stage. The versions on record just kind of feel tired and low E. This might be due in part to the awful recording conditions, detailed in my History of Ween episode, where the band recorded the initial batch of tracks that would later be developed with Andrew Weiss for Friends and La Cucaracha. But I'm sure it also didn't help that Gene was surely already contemplating leaving the band to pursue Freeman and his home life, while Dean would have been content to carry on forever. Kind of interesting how the roles have reversed now. At the end of the day, I do think La Cucaracha is a good album. While sort of inconsistent, it does have killer singles, unlike the Friends EP. And in any other band's discography, this would be a highlight. But Ween aren't any other band, and they just so happen to have 9 more albums that top this one. Ween's 1990 label debut, God Ween Satan the Oneness, is a lot of things. It's easily Ween's noisiest and punkiest album, with endless juvenile, snot-nosed aggression and crude lyricism. In a sense, God Ween Satan is also the most Ween album, being the studio album with the most tracks, at 26 in the original and 29 for the remaster. The only songs here that really hinted what Ween would become are Don't Laugh I Love You, with its pure guava-esque sweet melody, delivered by Verisped vocals, and Birthday Boy, which, stripped of distortion, could have easily been on White Pepper, alongside Stay Forever and She's Your Baby. The band's next album, The Pod, was also crass, but that attitude was hidden behind layers of sludgy lo-fi. God Ween Satan is like a direct, dry output of pure brown.
It is the 90s. It is the 90s. And we are Ween.
I feel like the 3 tracks added for the remaster, those being Bumblebee Part 2, Stacy, and Hippie Smell, really add to the album. In particular, I can't imagine the album without Hippie Smell. It's such a fun song. While I do love God Ween Satan, and I think it might be Ween's most charming record, it's hard to compare the songwriting ability here with the heights they would reach later on. The fun factor is here, and maybe that's enough for you. But if you're looking for brownness, their next 2 albums would see the band improving their skills as songwriters, while still keeping some semblance of that youthful energy displayed on God Ween Satan.
It was really a sad thing. I wrote a song about it.
An all-star cast of country players. Well, why did they want to play with me?
Why?
Yeah.
Coughed up the cash.
Yeah, we had the cash.
12 Golden Country Greats was the band's 5th album, and their first to not be produced by Andrew Weiss. After starting the recording sessions for the album that would become The Mollusk, the band drove to Nashville with a set of 11 4-track country demos and a dream. Charlie McCoy did an incredible job rearranging the lo-fi, brown demos from the brothers Ween into real events. It's a credit to him that Piss Up a Rope is such a relative hit on streaming, whereas something like Flies on My Dick from Pure Guava is not.
That was just a fun time recording it. I mean, the whole album, I would assume, just recording with those people would be really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Lots of fun.
Huge props also to Ben Vaughn, who produced the hell out of this thing. 4 years before White Pepper, it must have blown people's minds when it was revealed that something as gorgeous and expansive as You Were the Fool was from the guys who wrought Push the Little Daisies. It was also, to this point, the most earnest record Ween had made thus far, with I'm Holding You, I Don't Want to Leave You on the Farm, and Help Me Scrape the Mucus being pretty much totally devoid of any irony, just straight up sweet songs. And with only 10 songs, that's a higher hit rate than Chalk and Cheese had 2 years earlier. While I love Mr. Richard Smoker and Piss Up a Rope, I do understand why some might find them annoying, Richard Smoker in particular. And like with many Ween compositions, the live version of Pretty Girl is, in my opinion, leagues better than the version on record, with the snappier tempo, and Gene's vocals are shifted into a less muddy timbre. I hold this belief so strongly that at this point the album version is honestly a skip for me. I'd rather queue up the live in Toronto, Canada version after I Don't Want to Leave You on the Farm. A part of me also wishes the Muhammad Ali section was still in Powder Blue, though realistically the song just ending after Gene introduces him is probably funnier.
I'd like to present Muhammad Ali.
And of course, Fluffy is an epic end to the album. So while it's number 8 on my list, I can absolutely understand the people who claim this is their favorite. Much like Chalk and Cheese, it's a fascinating midpoint in the band's career, between their snot-nosed sardonic roots and their sincerely masterful efforts from the Mollusk through Quebec. Oh yeah, and the title is also very funny.
You really think we're that, like, sensitive, artistically conscientious to be, like, insulted by Beavis and Butthead?
Skoda. Simply clever.
Shinola Volume 1 was the band's 2005 compilation of remixed and re-recorded material, drawn from the wealth of outtakes they had accrued over the previous 7 album cycles. But this isn't a dump of everything they had in the vault, as great as that would have been. These 12 tracks were carefully curated and whittled down from hundreds of contenders. So in a sense, Shinola is less of an outtake album and more of a greatest hits. And these hits are great. Tracks like I Fell in Love Today, Gabrielle, Did You See Me, Monique the Freak, and Someday are some of the catchiest and best produced Ween songs ever. There are also a ton of fun album cuts, like Tastes Good on the Bun, Boys Club, Transitions, and even spoken word jazz track Israel. While I do love this album, I will say the 10th track, The Rift, is probably one of my least favorite Ween tracks. I'm not really a fan of the nursery rhyme-esque melody that repeats over and over for 6 minutes, but evidently Dean loves this song, since this is one of the Ween songs that the Dean Ween group plays the most. So I'll let him have it. I think the main thing to note with Shinola is that it's a compilation, which is both a blessing and a curse. I'm sure it was super exciting for Ween fans in 2005 to finally hear hi-fi versions of these outtakes they'd been hearing on Ween.net and live at shows. And again, some of these tracks are timeless, super accessible songs that could serve to get your friends and loved ones into Ween. But Shinola doesn't really have its own identity. I mean, it's basically Craters of the Sack and the Mollusk Sessions blended together. All of Ween's albums are genre diverse, but the fact that they were recorded together during the same context in the band's history gives them an identity. Like, sure, there's country and Mediterranean noise rock and instrumental music on Chocolate and Cheese, but it still has a cohesion to it that Shinola intrinsically doesn't have. All that said, Shinola is a great album. It didn't feel like a letdown after Quebec, and it's one of the projects that I listen to most because of just how fun it is through and through.
Shit. Shinola.
Son, you're gonna be all right.
Ween's second studio album, The Pod, is maybe their most infamous, commonly referred to as their brownest and least accessible record. While there is some truth to that claim, tracks like Jammy Pack, Molly, and Mononucleosis are so lo-fi and dissonant that I think they would probably send a Benson Boone fan into a coma. Cuts like Dr. Rock, Pollo Asado, Falling in Love, and Pork Roll, Egg and Cheese are far catchier and more melody-oriented than anything on Goblin Satan.
So mama, if you please, pass me the pork roll, egg and cheese. If you please, all the Kaiser fun.
Add to that the introduction of some level of sincerity in the lyrics, however scarce, and I think The Pod is an overall more well-rounded record than its predecessor. That said, like with Goblin Satan, many of the most iconic and well-written tracks have really come alive on stage after the album's release. You're really able to appreciate the songwriting on display in a track like Right to the Ways, Don't Sweat It, or She Fucks Me, when you can actually hear the melody without a thick layer of flange over the top. With an album cover featuring probably the second most iconic image from the band, aside from the titular mollusk, The Pod feels like an event when you're listening. You might not like it your first, second, or even third time through, but eventually you'll be won over to the awesome sound going down.
Okay, let me get 2 carne asada tacos.
This is Mickey Melchiondo and Aaron Freeman, both halves of Ween.
This was a tough one, since my ranking for Pure Guava and The Pod changed day to day. Sometimes I prefer the trip-hop inspired tracks on Guava, some days I'd rather go for the sludgy swamp rock on The Pod. But for today I'm feeling that Pure Guava, the band's third album, is just a hair better than The Pod. While still drenched in that lo-fi 4-track production, the sun occasionally shines through on Pure Guava, with tracks like Don't Get Too Close and Sarah, stripping everything back to the basics. Just pure melody. Guava features some of Ween's greatest compositions, period, like Tender Situation, The Stallion Part 3, Push the Little Daisies, and Big Jim, along with that drum machine-propelled holy trinity of Get Go, Reggae Junkie, and Play It Off Legit. Like with quite a few tracks on The Pod, some of these songs wouldn't really be perfected, in my opinion, until they've been played around with on stage for years. For me, Tender Situation, Pumpin' for the Man, and I Saw Gina Crying are 3 such songs. But I think Pure Guava is a smidge hookier than The Pod, and represents a huge stepping stone for the band towards the heights they would reach with their next record. Again, this is one where I would totally understand if it was your favorite. It's like the band's brown era distilled into a single record. But for me, it's just number 5. I hope I played that off legit.
It's Ween!
It's a white
classic album.
Yeah,
title.
White Pepper sounds like it could be the name of a classic rock album.
White Pepper was Ween's 7th and final album to be released on a major label, marking the end of the band's longtime relationship with Elektra. In many ways, White Pepper is Ween's poppiest, most accessible, best produced, and arguably most beautiful record, but also the one that feels the least Ween, somehow. Showing this to someone as their first Ween album would be basically a lie by omission. Many of the more silly and subversive qualities are downplayed in favor of hooky ballads, sort of like It's Gonna Be Alright or She Wanted to Leave from the Mollusk. Even the hardest rocking track, Stroker Ace, plays like a no funny business Motorhead tribute, with the closest thing to a joke being the mention of real man Dick Trickle. So it's understandable that some fans in the summer of 2000 were disappointed in White Pepper, seeing it as the least Ween album. I think it's undeniable that these are 12 of the strongest songs the band ever wrote and recorded. I mean, they're firing on all cylinders here. Exactly Where I'm At is maybe the greatest opening to an album ever. It perfectly establishes the tone of the album to come, while also housing maybe Dean's best and weirdest guitar solo since Voodoo Lady. Flutes of Chi and Back to Bassum are pure psych bliss, the Grobe and Stroker Ace are fuzzed out ragers, Bananas and Blow introduces some of the Caribbean vibes we'd come to hear more of on Friends and La Cucaracha, while also being one of the band's catchiest songs, and Ice Castles is a weird diversion into dungeon synth, right smack dab in the middle of the album. Pandy Fackler features Dean on vocals for a yacht rock inspired song, and finally the album ends with a suite of radio-friendly ballads, which see Gene getting in touch with his sensitive side.
We don't have a songwriting process, even after all this time. It's just whatever it takes. And when it comes time to write songs and record, if you have any idea at all, you know, if either of us do, we'll pursue it and see it through. And you know, a lot of times we're into like quantity before quality, and we'll try and record 3 songs in the day, you know. And chances are, you know, something good will come out of that.
While all seeming very different on paper, White Pepper might have Ween's most cohesive track list since The Pod, I guess. Instead of a mixtape of a bunch of varied ideas the band had been hashing out, Pepper feels like an album made the traditional way. A band going into the studio, fleshing out the songs in one batch, and creating a vision more singular than we had seen from Ween before. To many people, especially those with broader tastes, White Pepper might just be the band's quote-unquote best album. It's pretty much perfect, but it does lack a certain element of idiosyncrasy that the 3 albums above it have in spades. And that's why number 4 is exactly where it's at.
If I had to pick the typical Ween fan, it's some kid like sitting at home smoking weed, listening to our record.
Chocolate and Cheese was the band's first record recorded in a dedicated studio space, rather than the bedrooms and basements of friends and well-wishers. It was also Ween's first album to be recorded digitally, which turned out to be a nightmare in its own right. As evidenced by the extra disc of outtakes to be found on the deluxe version, 1994 was a very productive year for Ween, as their unending ambition was finally caught up to by their songwriting, performing, and production skills. Tracks like Take Me Away, Freedom of 76, A Tear for Eddie, Baby Bitch, and What Diener Was Talking About are all completely sincere, but there's still fun to be had on Pony, Voodoo Lady, HIV Song, and Buenos Tardes. And of course, remnants of the Brown era still persist on Spinal Meningitis and Candy. The music videos for Can't Put My Finger on It, Freedom, and Voodoo saw Ween step into the mold of a 90s MTV era band like never before. And this era would also see the addition of Claude Coleman on drums as a full-time member. Ween had basically grown up. Well, almost. In a manner of speaking, Chocolate and Cheese was the first Ween album that didn't require an asterisk before it. The only risk factor that makes you more likely to fall in love with Chocolate and Cheese is a love of music. And that's a huge reason why it's at number 3.
Cucumber sauce is like the greatest thing ever invented.
Yeah, you guys work for the Falafel Council, don't you?
The mollusk. Please welcome.
The mollusk!
Oh, the mollusk, all right, like the crab? Okay.
Well, here we are. What can be said about The Mollusk? It's easily the band's most famous record, the one 90% of people with only a passing knowledge of the band are familiar with. Recorded before and after the country album by Gene and Dean at a beach house that would later flood completely, The Mollusk is very indicative of a time and place for the band. Post-breakup for Gene, done in the absence of guiding light Andrew Weiss, and delivered to less than enthusiastic reception by Elektra, The Mollusk seemed like it would be an awkward growth period for Ween. A record they needed to get out of their system before finding a new status quo. Instead, it became their opus. Balancing a cohesive nautical vibe with the genre hopping of Chalk and Cheese, Tracks like Dancing in the Show, The Blarney Stone, and Waving My Dick bring the fun factor we'd expect from Ween, while also bringing the heartbreak like never before on songs like It's Gonna Be Alright, Cold Blows the Wind, and She Wanted to Leave. The title track, Johnny on the Spot, and Mutilated Lips fast became fan favorites, and the band really outdid themselves with the epic production on the Golden Eel and Buckingham Green. Then there's Ocean Man, Ween's most popular song by orders of magnitude. And what can I say? It's a great song. It perfectly fits that 1997 pop rock, salt life, sun and fun vibe. And obviously, the Mollusks' impact on SpongeBob, one of the biggest animated shows of all time, cannot be overstated. And I have a whole video on that if you're interested. So yeah, The Mollusk is a perfect album. Spoilers, Ween have a couple of those. But it's not my personal favorite, and if you're following along, you already know where I'm going with this.
They're supposed to be known for the studio sound, the organic, small, beautiful Ween thing.
Yeah, it was for all the kids basically that come to the Ween website.
Quebec is not only my favorite Ween album, I also think it's just one of the greatest records of all time. It strikes the perfect stylistic compromise, poppy and accessible like White Pepper, with songs like Tried and True and Transdermal Celebration, and weird and vaguely sinister like the Brown Era, with tracks like People in the Neighborhood and The F*** Jam. Most of Ween's darkest material ever is found on the back half of this album, but there are also pockets of joy to be found. If there was one word I'd use to describe Quebec, it would be sublime. Though he would later go on to say he got lost in the doll sauce, I think Andrew Weiss perfected his production techniques on this record. Listening to this thing with headphones on or a pair of hi-fi speakers is such a treat every time. I'm serious when I say this is pretty much on the level of a George Martin produced Beatles album. While it's immediately evident how great the hooky hits like Long Night, the emotional catharsis on Save Yourself, and the sweet alt-country of Chocolate Town are, my favorites as of late have been the more atmospheric and gazy tracks like Captain and Alcan Road. Every time you listen, you pick out new things to appreciate. So while I think both The Mollusk and Quebec are 10s, Quebec will always be my favorite. It feels like a culmination of everything they have been working towards, followed by Shinola as a victory lap. Unreal. Okay, that's my ranking of Ween's studio discography. Again, be sure to drop yours down below. Stay tuned for more History of Ween Extras videos coming soon. Thanks for watching, and stay brown.